Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, which we run in our series of monthly legal basics. And today we have an important topic that many people keep asking about: foreign exchange controls and banking regulations in Ukraine. We have on our agenda 3 topics: overview of key foreign exchange restrictions, practical aspects of opening and operating bank accounts, and then company financing, charter capital, intergroup loans, and compliance requirements. We have 2 good speakers on the subject, both from SCHNEIDER Group, that's Artem Barinov and Vladyslav Satanin. I think we can, the idea is always that you can also ask questions. Please use the chat function for that. And we will try to pick up on those questions then after the presenter's presentation. Well, let's get going. I think is the order that first Artem speaks?
Yes, I will start. Thank you, Rainer. Hello, dear participants. Welcome to our webinar. Just give me a second to share the presentation. So, do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, then let's get started. So we are going to speak today about the foreign currency rules and regulations in Ukraine. This topic is very interesting, very dynamic. It's, I would say, in constant development in the recent time, and the relevant legislation is changing quite rapidly and dramatically. It provides quite many surprises to the companies operating in Ukraine. That's why it makes sense to have updates from time to time. What is going on? What are the current restrictions? What payments are possible? And if there are any difficulties with payments execution and bank compliance. Therefore, we will talk about several interesting topics today. So we would like to present for you some kind of a practical overview of current foreign currency restrictions, bank account operations, bank compliant requirements for companies doing business in Ukraine. Among others, we will outline the regulatory framework of respective legislation of Ukraine. We will focus on Ukraine's foreign currency restrictions adopted during the martial law. We will also will try to classify the payments as permitted payments and sensitive ones. We will also slightly touch the topic of bank account opening as well as bank compliance. We will also present to you some kind of a practical payment checklist, what is necessary to do if you want your payment to be executed. And as well, we will speak about the options for company financing, which is also related to the banking regulations, but also provides some insights, some experience in the area of correct business planning. So this topic will be presented by my colleague Vladyslav. So let's get started with our first topic, foreign currency regulations in Ukraine. The regulatory framework of this area in Ukraine is quite different, I would say. It consists of several layers. So there is a general legislation regulating this area, consisting of law of Ukraine on currency and currency transactions. It provides the basic principle of currency freedom, which exists since this law has been adopted. Then there is a next layer, wartime foreign currency restrictions. They were introduced in February 2022 after the Russian full-scale invasion to Ukraine. And these restrictions are mainly regulated by National Bank Resolution number 18. This document has suffered a lot of changes, and it changes constantly. That's why we always recommend, even when you will have this presentation and will make up some plans for yourself, just take a second and see the updated version of this regulation, because something might be changed and it might impact your plans sometimes dramatically. As well, the third layer of regulations is bank account and payment rules. So these are the rules, general rules of operating bank accounts, opening bank accounts, provision of necessary information and documents to the bank, as well as currency supervision. And the last one is actually bank compliance. Currently in Ukraine, all the banks have quite strong compliance teams, and they are usually in constant contact with the customers. They always are ready to discuss, to check your information about the ultimate beneficial owner, the ownership structure. They ask the customers for regular, usually annual or semi-annual updates of this information. And as well, there are internal bank procedures, which the customers usually do not know in advance, but they also can significantly impact the communication, the plans, and manner and time for execution of foreign currency payments. So what else we can talk about here? In practice, also, the companies operating in Ukraine, they deal not only with banking rules, payment execution rules, and financial monitoring, but also with special international legislation about sanctions. So sanction screening is in place, and then the legal questions is not only whether the payment is due under the contract, and you outlined all the conditions and regulations to do this payment, but also whether the bank is allowed and comfortable to process this payment. So all these, let's say, elements have to be in order, so that you can make your payment executed and successful. And your business deal would be also in relation to your counterpart, could be successful or by some reasons delayed or even canceled by the Ukrainian bank. So next topic we will talk about. So what are the general principles of Ukrainian foreign exchange rules? First of all, I already mentioned that we have a principle of foreign currency liberalization, which was adopted after the special law came into force way before the martial law started. So it was the first edition in 2019. And since then, we have a principle of currency freedom. But of course, in 2022, it was quite severely restricted by the special regulations. This is National Bank of Ukraine regulation number 18. And what is important to mention here, that before these restrictions came into force, there were the following general rules: that the contract and contractual obligation outlined in this document was enough, basically, to make the payment. You had to provide the commercial documents. You had to somehow give the basic understanding of the commercial purpose of your payment. And if restrictions would be imposed by the bank, it would serve as some kind of exemption. And the bank would see some risks in this situation, and you would be informed about this. After the wartime restrictions came into force, the logic has actually changed. So the contract, I would say, is not sufficient anymore, because there are also special rules that define the categories of payment. So you have not only have to present all the documents related to your payment, contracts, invoices, any delivery documents, customs documents, acceptance goods or services, or works protocols, but also your payment has to belong to the category permitted by the Ukrainian legislation. And also, what is important, that bank compliance rules come into force, and your payment and overall situation has to be checked and has to be confirmed by bank officials, and only then you will be able to make your payment. So in practice, the companies should not start only with the question whether payment is due under the contract. They should also ask themselves at first, check with the legislation, and also then ask the bank in advance when planning any commercial deals, whether the current NBU rules permit such payment, and whether the bank will be able to process such payment from compliance perspective. And if not, or if this is like under condition, what are the requirements to make this happen, and what information or documents would Ukrainian bank ask to actually allow payment to be authorized. Next one, there is some kind of internal order for any company, what has to be taken into account before you plan any payments. So first of all, you have to check the parties to your deal, because it's important to understand who will be whether the payment is made in favor of Ukrainian company, or it's made in favor of the foreign company, which is usually more difficult, because incoming payments are treated, I would say, with a certain degree of favor from the Ukrainian banks, but outgoing payments are usually under strict control and under strict scrutiny from the bank officials. That's why in order to plan your commercial deal, you have to understand who will be the contract party, to which country you will make the payment. You have to prepare all the documents like contracts, delivery notes, acceptance protocols, and so on, so that all your contractual bases have to be protected in communication with bank officials. As well, important to understand whether you need to purchase the foreign currency to make the payment. I'm speaking about outgoing payments as the most complex situation, I would say. And for this purpose, you would need the foreign currency. Ukrainian law says, and the regulation number 18 says that in general, the payments in foreign currency are not allowed, and you cannot purchase the foreign currency. You cannot ask your bank to purchase the foreign currency if you have the foreign currency on your own accounts, which means that if your payment is allowed, you have to do this at the expense of the currency which is located at your bank account. Only if there is no available foreign currency at the company's bank account, you may ask the bank for purchasing the foreign currency. That's why you have to take this in account in advance and calculate whether you have the necessary amount of foreign currency, or you will be asking your bank to purchase it. The next step in this internal procedure is to check the category of payment, whether the NBU, National Bank of Ukraine, allows to make such payment, whether and to which category of payments the payment that you plan belongs to. Usually afterwards, you would have a preliminary conversation with the bank officials. So you have to provide to them a file of supporting documents, which not only like formal documents that confirm the contract and invoice of your deal, but as well, it is quite often the practice in Ukraine that the bank officials will ask you for some kind of justification of economical reason of such payment. And you have to provide formal explanation why would you make the outgoing payment in foreign currency and what would it bring for your company, what benefit would it bring, what economical sense is behind this. And I will say from practice, it happens not only with outgoing payments, but also sometimes with incoming payments, especially when you try to arrange some loan or credit. You have to provide to the bank the information why would you need this credit and for which purpose would your company spend the money received. And the last step in this process is checking the compliance. So the bank officials will attentively check your company, your counterpart, and the deal overall for compliance risks. So they will maybe ask some AML information. They will make the sanctions screening. And if the information about your UBO hasn't been updated for some time, or they see the discrepancy between the information located in the bank records and in the official sources, they will ask you to at first explain why this discrepancy exists, and then potentially they would also ask you to make the correction if they come to the conclusion that the information in the state register is not correct. So you have to take this in account, because if you plan to make some important payment and then you see that the bank came to the conclusion that you have to update the information in the state register about the ownership structure or UBO of your company, you might lose quite much time to bring this into compliance and update this official information. And during this time, you may probably, in some cases, lose the benefits that would be provided by the commercial deal if it would be paid in time, and the bank would not delay asking all this question and all this information. That is why it is important to take this information into account in advance and check the information about your company in the state registers and to be protected from such delays. Next one, we will talk about the permitted categories that are provided by the NBU regulations. So you have to understand that not all the payments are treated in the same way. There could be payments that require more attention from the bank officials, and there could be payments that require less, and they taken with some ease from the party of bank officials. And for this purpose, you have to check to which category your payment belongs to. So it could be the most, I would say, important or the most applicable categories. It could be import of goods. These payments are usually quite clearly understood by the banks, and now you can import the goods without, if you have the relevant documents, there are no special restrictions unlike year 2022, where there were some special lists of goods that could have been imported, but they were lifted quite quickly, I would say. And now import of goods is treated more or less clearly and does not require many additional information to be provided. Only like the standard documents, contract, invoice, customs documents, delivery will be enough to clear this payment. Import of services depends on the nature of services, I must say, because there could be some kind of operational services that are required for functioning in your company, and you usually require these services to be delivered by external provider. In this case, there is more or less standard category, although you have to provide the business reasoning for such payment for the services. But as well, there could be, and this is the category number 5, the services of consulting, management, marketing nature, which are usually provided within the group of the companies of foreign investors that operate in Ukraine. And for these purposes, usually the bank asks for additional information. They would ask you for a business reason of such payments. They would ask you and your counterpart probably about the functions that are performed in order to justify the payment for such service. And they will check if you, by doing this payment, you do not try to circumvent the current restrictions for, let's say, payment of dividends out of Ukraine, because sometimes it happens that the payment for the services is could be treated as a hidden dividend. That's why the bank officials pay close attention to such situation and ask you for additional information. If we speak about the profit repatriation, like payment of dividends and distributions, there is also special procedure. There are special rules for this payment, and you should expect that you will be asked for quite many documents and information to make this happen. Loans, credits, group financing. This is payments that require to finance your business as well. A separate category, a separate procedure that is performed by bank officials, and you should expect additional documents and information asked for this purpose. Another category that happens as well, export, payments for export, and prepayments for import that require keeping certain deadlines. So you have to be ready for this, and you have to be attentive to keeping the relevant deadlines, because the bank will ask for it, no doubt. We take a look at some most popular categories of payments, and shortly outline for you the list of standard information and documents that could be asked by the banks to make this payment happen. So if you have import payments for goods or services, usually, as I said, for goods, it's more straightforward. You just have to provide a supply contract, invoice, customs declaration, delivery documents, information about goods, price, payment purpose, and consistency of this payment. If we're speaking about the services, of course, you cannot conform with customs documents that you pay for the services. That's why here there could be some additional explanation asked about the nature of the services, about the purpose of the services, especially if they seem for the bank as quite expensive ones. And you have to be prepared to describe for them the business purpose of payment for such service. So that's why we come to the conclusion that even if formally the payment is permitted by the national bank regulation, it is not automatically executed by the bank, because at the stage of checking the information, the bank might ask the questions, the bank might cause delays or even not authorize these payments by the reasons that are seemed for the bank important and reasonable. And unfortunately, you cannot do anything about this. In most cases, you just have to search for another bank or have to be ready for a long negotiation if the bank will value you as a client and will be ready to talk to you about this. Sensitive payments to non-residents, what is important to take a look here. So the standard payments that are requiring less information from the banks could be the operational payments necessary for functioning the company, clearly documented services, arm's length third-party payments. So these are payments to related parties, but you can justify the, let's say, market level of the prices that you pay. Category of payments that require higher scrutiny from the bank usually is consulting, management, marketing fees paid intragroup, royalties and IP payments, licensing, and any similar payments that you usually do. And also related party service charges, especially for high amount of service price. And the third category, the most difficult one, where the special rules are in place, both from the AVU and also strengthens compliance from the bank side. This is a dividends and profit distribution, loan repayment, shareholder intergroup financing, and pre-war obligations, which means that some old contracts, old debts that you had to pay before the full-scale war started, because in some cases, currently, according to the legislation, such obligations and their execution is has been frozen, and you cannot and you cannot execute a part of such obligations. That's why this information will be analyzed by the bank if it comes to such situation. We also can speak about the dividends a bit more in detail. So the dividends are currently partially not allowed to distribute in Ukraine. We speak mostly about the dividends for previous years before 2023. So the last change in the regulations of National Bank number 18 allowed to make the distribution of dividends that accrued for the year 2023 and later, which was possible earlier. So 2023 is the most recent year for which the dividends can be paid. And as well, there is a special limit for payment of such dividends, €1 million per month. So what to check in your case? You have to take a look at the period of dividends, monthly limit, shareholder information and jurisdictions, and anti-circumvention criteria, so that the bank do not think that you try to hide dividends under any other payments. If we speak about the royalties or intellectual property fees, they also have to be checked if they belong to the special permitted payment categories. You have to control the license agreement, the documents confirming IP rights, beneficiary, and economic rationale of such payment. If we speak about the management consulting marketing fees, it can be qualified as permitted service payments, but they reviewed carefully, especially if delivered within the group to related parties and if they cost some unusual amount of money at the view of the bank. That's why you have to prepare the deliverables that confirm results of such services, act of services delivery, business purpose of such payment, and to provide information about the related parties if they belong to your groups. Any other related party charges usually also are treated with higher scrutiny from the bank, and the important information for them is pricing, group relations, group structure, supporting documents, and substance. Speaking of external loans, there are also quite many special rules and quite many different categories that exist and that are regulated differently. So first of all, we can divide the loans to so-called new loans, which can be granted currently, and after the 20th of June 2023, and old loans, which have been granted before this date. And at the moment, for the old loans, you are not able to repay the principal of the old loans, and but you at some point are able to pay the interest on these loans. So you have to check usually the most recent edition of regulation number 18 to understand what is possible to do with the loan. If the loan is provided after the 20th of June 2023, then you have more possibilities for repayment of the principal of the loans and the interest under such loan. But as well, you have to take into account there could be special rules about the time that this loan, minimal time of usage of the loan, and as well, the question could be also somehow expedite by introduction in Ukrainian legislation of so-called stimulated limit. So this stimulated limit was provided first in 2025, and it is called in such a way, the regulators call the money that have been provided under the new loans. The most recent ones, let's say, and if you are ready to provide the loan within the stimulating limit to repay the old loan, then for you it could be easier to get rid of your old debts and stabilize your financial situation if it's crucial for you. Now we are going to speak about bank accounts in Ukraine and the procedure of their opening and operation. So, of course, there are some general rules about this. They are provided by the National Bank Resolutions number 162. And every bank has their own, let's say, internal rules, internal requests of information, internal list of documents that you have to provide to them. Usually, there are peculiarities in every bank, so it's also some kind of a human factor, and the question of how tight the rules are. But in general, on average, you have to be expect that you will be asked for corporate documents of your company, tax registration details, information about the ownership structure, UBO. Directors and authorized signatories, and expected business activities, limit of expected income per year, maybe some special questions about your future activities in Ukraine. So you open the bank account, but this does not mean that the checks from the bank are stopped. No, they continue. Let's say it's a constant monitoring, and in case you have any outgoing payments from your bank account and you try to do this, you will be again, as a part of some kind of regular procedure, asked for the sensitive information about this payment. I partially repeated the list of information and documents, but in general, they will ask for information about the transactions, the payment purpose, the check for permitted categories by National Bank of Ukraine, AML and sanction screening, and request for updated documents if the documents have not been updated for a certain time. what is important to check before processing payments from the side of the banks? So this is a bit more details on the request from the bank. So they usually ask the transaction documents, which are related, consist of a contract, invoice, acts, customs documents, the payment purpose, the check with the NBU, foreign currency restrictions, counterparty and jurisdiction information to which your payment will come, and client profile, source of funds. This is about your company and from which sources do you intend to make this payment. If you go through all these filters, as you can see at the slide, the result will be the payment is executed. If one of the filter does not allow you to make it, then at least you can be delayed with your payment. So, and the practical checklist for you in case you make any outgoing foreign currency payments. So at least 8 standard steps to take into account. So first of all, identify the payment category. What you are paying for, or you disburse the dividends, or you repay the loans, and so on. Check whether you require to purchase the foreign currency. Confirm the permission from the NBU that the payment falls into the permitted category. Prepare the list of supported documents. Ask your bank in advance for this. Align the payment purpose wording. It's also important at the final stage of negotiation with the bank. Check the settlement deadlines. Get information about your counterparty and jurisdictions to whom you will pay, and make communication with the bank, discuss sensitive payments with them, and of course, before the payment is due. And what we, from our practical experience, also recommend to you, do not promise to your counterparts the payment terms that may not be executable in practice because of banks, additional information requests, and any discussion that takes a lot of time. So this is it from my side, and my colleague Vladyslav will continue about the options for company financing.
Yeah, thank you, Artem. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. In continuation of the Artem speech, I would like to discuss one of the most practical legal and tax topics that foreign investors face when they start doing their business or ongoing business with Ukraine. How to finance a Ukrainian company efficiently while complying with the Ukrainian currency control, banking requirements, and tax legislation. So, when an investor decides to inject some funds into a Ukrainian company, the transaction is rarely as simple as transferring money from one bank account to another. But in practice, every transaction involves several stakeholders. So, besides the investor and the Ukrainian company, the servicing bank plays a central role, as Artem said, in reviewing the transaction. Also, while tax legislation and currency control rules determine how the funding should be structured. Selected the wrong financial method may result its unnecessary taxation, delays in payment processing, additional request from the bank, or even the inability to repatriate your funds in the future. So today we will review the 3 financing structure most commonly used by the foreign investors. The first one is chapter capital. The second one is intercompany loans, and the third one is financial aid. For each option, we will discuss corporate requirements, bank expectations, and currency control rules. And the most important, the tax legislation. Next slide, please. At first glance, these 3 financing methods may appear very similar. In each case, funds are transferred from the foreign shareholder to Ukrainian company. However, from a legal and tax perspective, these transactions are fundamentally different. An equity contribution increases the company's net assets and demonstrates a long-term investment commitment. An intercompany loan creates a repayment obligation and often includes interest payments. Financial aid, depending on its legal form, it may be either resemble or interest-free loan or constitute a permanent financial contribution. This difference affects almost every aspect of the transaction. The bank reviews different documents. The accounting treatment change from time to time. Tax consequence is different. Transfer pricing rule may apply. Even the ability to recover the invested funds in the future depends on the selected financial structure. Many investors focus primarily on today's transaction. However, experienced investors are also consider tomorrow's exit strategy. Next slide, please. So let's see the option one. A chapter capital increase remains the preferred financial method for many multinational groups making a long-term investment in Ukraine. Unlike debt financing, an equity contribution permanently strengthens the company's financial position and improves its balance sheet. From a legal perspective, increasing the chapter capital is a corporate procedure rather than merely a financial transaction. The process generally begins with a resolution adopted by the shareholder of the general meeting of the participants. Depending on the company's legal structure, amendments to the charter may also be required, followed by registration of the updated information in Ukrainian state register. Only after the corporate steps have been completed should the investment funds be transferred. From the bond's perspective, an equity contribution represents an investment transaction. Next slide, please. Investor frequently underestimate the importance of properly describing the payment purpose. An inaccurate payment reference often results in additional compliance questions and delays. Banks examining the ownership structure of both the investor and the Ukrainian subsidiary, UBO are verified, sanction screening is performed, and the legitimacy of the funding source is assessed. In addition, banks evaluate whether the proposed transaction makes commercial sense. For example, compliance officer may ask you why the investment is structured as an equity rather than debt, or request additional documents explaining the business. It is also important to understand that each Ukrainian bank applies its own internal compliance procedure, as Artem said. Although all banks operate under the same regulatory framework established by the MDU, documentary requirements may differ sufficiently from the institution from one to another. For the reason, investors are strongly encouraged to communicate with their servicing bank before initiation significant cross-border funding transaction. Next slide, please. So, from a tax perspective, chapter capital contribution is generally one of the most efficient funding mechanisms available to foreign investors. Under Ukrainian tax legislation, contributions made to chapter capital are generally not recognized as a taxable income for the Ukrainian company. Similarly, such contributions do not trigger VAT and are not subject to Ukrainian withholding tax. However, tax efficiency at the time of investment should not be confused with flexibility at the same time of existence. Unlike a loan, equity cannot simply be repaid to the shareholder upon their request. Instead, the investor will usually recover value through dividends distribution, a sales of share, capital reduction, or liquidation of the company. Each of the mechanisms has its own legal, tax, and currency control implications. The long-term perspective often determines whether equity financing or debt financing is more appropriate solution. Next slide, please. So, The second, and probably the most widely used funding mechanism within multinational groups, is the intercompany loan. Unlike an equity contribution, a loan allows the shareholder to provide financial support while preserving the ability to recover the fund at its later stage. For many investors, this flexibility represents the main advantage of debt financing. Intercompany loans are commonly used to finance working capital, support business expansion, fund acquisitions, or provide temporary liability until the subsidiary becomes self-sufficient. From a corporate perspective, loan financing is generally less formal than increasing the chapter capital. In most cases, no amendments to the company's constitutional documents or state registration are required. However, the simplicity should not be underestimated. A cross-border loan is still subject to Ukraine banking regulations, tax legislation, and where applicable, transfer pricing rules. Furthermore, the commercial terms on the loan should always reflect the economic reality of the transaction. Properly drafted documentation significantly reduced the likelihood of additional questions from the both servicing bank and the tax authorities. Next slide, please. One of the most common misconceptions among foreign investors is that once the loan agreement has been signed, the funds can immediately be transferred to Ukraine. In practice, every cross-border loans undergoes a comprehensive compliance review by the servicing bank. Unlike domestic transactions, international financing attracts enhanced scrutiny due to anti-money AML requirements and currency control legislation. The bank will first verify the identity of the lender and borrower, reviewing the ownership structure and confirm the source of funds. However, the view does not stop there. Compliance officers also analyze whether the transaction is commercially reasonable. Typical question includes: why does the subsidiary require financing? Why has the shareholder chosen debt financing rather than equity contribution? How does the company intend to repay the loan? Does the repayment schedule appear realistic? Banks also compare the loan agreement with the payment instruction. Even minor inconsistencies in dates, currencies, borrower details, or transaction descriptions may result in additional requests for clarification. For these reasons, investors should not only assess whether funds can enter Ukraine today, but also whether they can be repaid tomorrow. Next slide, please. From a tax perspective, the treatment of the law principle is relatively straightforward. The amount received by the Ukrainian subsidiary is generally not recognized as a taxable income. The more complex issues arise in relation to interest payments. As a general rule, interest paid by Ukrainian borrower to a foreign lender may be subject to Ukrainian withholding tax. However, many multinational groups benefit from reduced withholding tax rates under applicable double taxation treaties. To apply treaty benefits, investors should ensure that the lender qualifies as a beneficial owner of the interest income and provides a valid certificate of tax residence. Another important consideration is the Ukrainian thin capitalization regime. Where statutory thresholds are exceeded, the deducibility of interest expense may be restricted, increasing the effective tax burden of the Ukrainian borrower. In addition, multinational groups should carefully assess whether transfer pricing rules apply. Although banks do not normally request transfer pricing documentations, tax authority may subsequently review whether the interest rate and financing conditions reflect arm's length principles. Next slide, please. Option number 2, financial aids. As a result, investors should carefully distinguish between the ability to transfer funds into Ukraine and ability to transfer back to the I'm so sorry. The third financial mechanism we'll discuss today is financial aid. Although less common than equity contribution or intercompany loans, financial and is still used within international corporate groups, particularly where shareholders wish to provide short-term financial support. Under Ukrainian practice, financial aid generally falls into two categories. Repayable financial aid is economically similar to an interest-free loan and is expected to be repaid by the recipient, or non-repayable financial aid, by contrast, represent a permanent financial contribution and therefore produce significantly different accounting and tax consequences. From the bank perspective, both structure require appropriate documentary support. Next slide, please. Banks will typically review the financial aid agreement, verify the relationship between the parties, and request an explanation of the commercial purpose of the transaction. Where the financing is interest-free, compliance terms often seek confirmation that the transaction reflects a genuine shareholder support arrangement, rather an attempt to find the regulatory or tax requirement. Accordingly, investors should carefully document the commercial rationale behind the transaction and ensure that the legal documentation accurately reflects its intended purpose. Next slide, please. Yeah. Although both types of financial aid involve the transfer of funds, they are treated differently for tax purposes. Repayable financial aid is generally regulated as a temporary financial, assuming that arrangement is properly documented and a genuine repayment obligation exists. The receipt of funds is generally not recognized as taxable income for the Ukrainian recipient. Likewise, repayment of the financial aid is generally tax neutral and does not trigger the VAT. However, the legal documentation is particularly important. The agreement should clearly specify the repayment obligation, maturity date, and other commercial terms. Poorly drafted agreements may create uncertainty during and tax audits and increase the risk of reclassification. Non-repayable financial aid is fundamentally different. As there is no obligation to return the funds, the transaction may constitute taxable income for the Ukrainian company and therefore affect its corporate income tax. Before selecting financial aid as a funding mechanism, investors should carefully evaluate whether its tax treatment aligns with their overall investment strategy. Next slide, please. Yeah. One of the most important messages I would like to leave with you today is that Ukrainian banks should be viewed as independent compliance goalkeeper rather than simple payment processor. Every significant cross-border binding transaction is assessed from the several perspectives. The first stage is a traditional know your customer review. The bank verifies the ownership structure, the UBO, and the identities of the parties involved. Secondary, anti-money laundering procedures are performed together with sanction screening. The bank then analyzes the transaction itself. Compliance officer compare the payment instruction with the underlying agreements, reviewing corporate approvals, and assess where the sufficient supporting documentation has been provided. Banks also evaluate the economic substance of the transaction. They may request additional explanation regarding the business rationale, intended use of funds, or expected repayment mechanism. Investors who proactively prepare comprehensive documentation generally experience significantly fewer delays than those who respond only after receiving additional requests from the bank. The last one. Next slide. Yeah. To conclude, I would like to leave you with three practical observations. First, Funding a Ukrainian subsidiary is not simply a financial transaction. It is a multidisciplinary process that requires coordination between legal, tax, finance, and banking professionals. Secondly, the most efficient funding structure is not always the one of the lowest immediate tax cost. It is the structure that remains commercially viable throughout the entire investment life cycle, from the initial capital injection to the eventual repatriation of profits or return of invested funds. Finally, early planning creates value. By assessing legal requirements, engaging with the servicing bank, and considering tax implications before transferring funds, investor can significantly reduce execution risks, minimize regulatory delays, and avoid costly disruption at the later stage. Ukraine continues to present attractive investment opportunity, and despite the current regulatory environment, cross-border financing remain both feasible and efficient when transactions are properly structured. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now be pleased to answer any question if you may. I think we have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Vladyslav and Artem. I'm looking at the chat. Cannot see a question. Maybe while people are thinking about a question, I have one probably for Artem. Where are we going with regard to foreign exchange regulation? You have a guess?
Thank you, Rainer. It's quite interesting and important question. Well, I would say that National Bank demonstrates some kind of a trend to gradually lift the restrictions, although sometimes it looks quite slowly because, for example, major change on foreign dividends was introduced in August 2025. So almost a year ago, and still no movements regarding the dividends accrued earlier than 2023. However, with some small steps, they try to make the situation more favorable for the companies operating in Ukraine. And I would say the more financial stability Ukraine will bring, the more the faster probably National Bank will lift the restrictions. Maybe the provision of financial aid credit for 90 billion from the European Union will contribute into this.
Okay. So, there is a question. Heiko Kreisel, are you aware about any changes expected regarding the repayment of the old intercompany loan and its related interest, in brackets, issued before the war?
Yeah, this was part of my presentation. So unfortunately, this is one of the hottest topics together with the old dividends, let's say. And here we do not see much progress from the National Bank of Ukraine. So the principal loan is not possible to pay. The interests are allowed to pay under certain peculiar conditions and in the amount of certain monthly limit.
Okay, thank you. Are there more questions from the audience? If not, we have was also approaching an hour's time now, 59 minutes for the webinar. Thank you. I think you have just presented the topic as so comprehensively that there are no further questions. Thank you very much to both speakers for good and comprehensive presentations. I wish you all a good week. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye-bye.